All right, so just gonna riff a little bit on why does my neck look so weird? Mainstream science versus a guess there's different names for it. I'll just say, trying to think of what name feels right for me, but I'll just say scientific materialism versus, I guess I've heard it called idealism, consciousness only model. And what do I want to say about it? Well, scientific materialism, the idea that matter is fundamental in the universe, and out of matter, out of these molecular structures, nothing beyond that. The physical world is the world, is creation. Physical world, I guess, as mediated by our senses, that which can be measured, weighed, and that, for instance, having that kind of foundational understanding that matter is the kind of the bedrock, one kind of consequence of that is that consciousness arises in this model, in the scientific materialist model. Consciousness is a byproduct or an epiphenomenon, to use the $10 word. Epiphenomenon, it is emergent from matter. That somehow some specific combination of neurons and brain circuitry, physical matter of the body, gives rise to what we call consciousness, awareness. So that is all on one side of the equation, one worldview, and it's useful to look kind of at the topmost, kind of the, however you want to look at topmost or most primary suppositions, because from those foundational ideas flow certain beliefs, certain lines of inquiry, certain a whole worldview basically flows downstream from those ideas. And it's sort of like if you want to adjust the course of a river, go to the headwaters, where the in the mountains where the river originates, and you can make just small adjustments there, and it'll have big impacts on the stream of the river downstream. Eloquent. And another possibility is that matter is not fundamental, but consciousness is fundamental. Spirit is fundamental. Being is fundamental. Just heard an owl. And out of that, and matter is sort of a derivation or a crystallization or a precipitation. Matter emerges out of consciousness. That matter is consciousness in the final analysis, but at a it's sort of like crystallized light, consciousness, light, energy, and it differentiates more and more as it rises or as it descends, whichever direction you want to look at that from undifferentiated, unindividuated totality, consciousness, the vast ocean of being, bliss, precipitates down, individuates, becomes more dense, takes on myriad forms. And so rather than consciousness emerging from the brain, you could say the inverse. You could say the brain arises out of consciousness, as does everything in the physical world and all the layers of creation. Ultimately, just different frequencies, different vibrations, different vibrational speeds, perhaps, of Om, of the all, of the original frequency. And again, it's like you go to these kind of big picture fundamental ideas, and it determines course of the river, everything that flows from those, a whole worldview, a whole understanding, a whole set of philosophical, cosmological, what word am I looking for here? Yeah, I guess just a whole worldview flows out from those original big ideas. And it has real world impacts. It's not just idle speculation. Sorry for the shaky camera. I wanted to set it up here, but that seems so far away. Modern medicine, a branch of scientific project, underwritten, undergirded, again, by this notion of matter being fundamental. Everything kind of reduces down to matter. And I don't know if they would, we'll just say that it's very simplistic probably, but we'll just say that in a very simple terms, everything can be reduced down to matter. And there are consequences for that belief. And you see it in how we approach medicine. Is it allopathic medicine? Is that the word I want? Anyways, modern medicine, which is basically looks at the human body as the not so different as one might look at a car, and there's definitely utility for it, looking at the body that way, because there's different parts and you need them to function in harmony, and you can design interventions, medications. You can prescribe certain things that will have an impact, for sure. But I think, especially, I think about with psychiatric medicine, with the ways in which consciousness and all the vast variety of experiences within consciousness, all the ways we can go off the rails, all the sort of diagnosable disorders, let's say, and beyond that, just all the variety of wild phenomena that can happen within consciousness that don't really cleanly fit into that kind of everything reduces down to matter model that seem to be exceptional cases that are not easily accommodated within modern medicine. That's when you start to notice the consequences of having these sort of foundational beliefs and the kinds of interventions, the kinds of treatments that are prescribed. And for example, to get a little bit more specific, that the brain becomes kind of the location of intervention, and we're sort of reduced down to basically just a complex organic machine. I don't think anybody would say the brain is not complex, but that it is ultimately just, everything from schizophrenia to anxiety to depression. Now, the brain does reflect, the brain is a part of this whole of these dynamics. The brain plays a role in mental illness and psychiatric disorders. I don't think that's in question. However, there are other ways to look at it. You notice that when you look at it just as a collection of molecules to be augmented or intervened with, to be amplified, to be rearranged. I'm trying to find the right word there. It seems sort of just the logical result, the logical outcome of those ideas is that if you're going off the rails in consciousness and these sort of more subtle levels of experience that the materialist model has a hard time accommodating, the intervention will be to medicate the brain. That's the source, ultimate source and location of mental psychiatric maladies. And you see very, very mixed results. You don't see, you see a lot of complications with SSRIs, with antipsychotics, a lot of side effects. Certainly not 100% efficacy. But when that's what your model posits, is that you're basically just this body, this organic body, that's where the interventions are going to aim every time. There's nothing else beyond this apparent physical world, so that's what the interventions will aim for. Now, switching to the other model, the consciousness-only model, the idealist model, I think I'd feel more comfortable saying something like this: the spirit-based model, spiritual model, that you have different layers of creation, starting from the most subtle, the most uniform, the most diffuse, the most oceanic, boundaryless, formless, up through or down through, again, however you want to envision that, down through layers of increasing density and increasing diversification of forms into this physical reality as the apparently most dense. But there are many subtler dimensions and other dimensions, from slightly less physical to, again, formless. And our beings reflect that sort of layering. It's not exactly perfectly layered because they all kind of blend together. It's seamless in a certain way, but your being has, this kind of gross reality, dense apparent physical reality, and then you've got your apparent inner world. That distinction collapses, but your inner world of ideas, thoughts, and then it gets a little bit more subtle, a little bit more abstract into feelings and emotions, and just kind of eventually starts to unwind or flow down into more, I guess, becomes more formless again, and it could probably best be described in terms of energy frequency. With that understanding of these layers, you can see that there are different possibilities of interventions and a whole different way of conceiving of the etiology, how do you pronounce that word? The origin and location of malady, of illness. I think probably, on any level, but just to stick with mental illness, that the true healing, the deeper healing, is not going to come. It's sort of like if you have a tree, the leaves would represent the kind of most superficial layer, the utmost superficial layer, which would be like our physical body, would be like the leaves. And as you get, down through the branches, you're getting more and more subtle, down through the trunk, and down into the roots, into the soil. If you have a disease in the tree that is coming from the roots, coming from the soil, but it's showing up in the leaves having spots on them, or I'm out of my wheelhouse in terms of tree diseases, and I'm not an arborist, but is that the word, arborist? But the leaves are kind of deforming and they look diseased. It's the difference between saying the way we're going to fix this is by painting the leaves or putting a Band-Aid on the leaves. That's sort of the scientific materialist approach is to address that the uppermost level. And this other approach allows for depth and going into the subtler layers of creation, down into the soil, as it were, and uprooting, dissolving, healing, releasing malady at that level. That's deep healing. It's not just addressing the symptom, it's addressing the roots. The scientific model doesn't account for that. It sort of shades into that, especially in certain branches of psychology and depth psychology, I believe. And, I'm definitely talking about the shadow with all of that. I'm talking about going into the deeper layers of the psyche or the soul or the being, consciousness, into the subconscious. and that's where a lot of this stuff is stored. So healing at that deeper levels, like going to the headwaters of the river, and you just need to make slight adjustments there. That changes the course of the river downstream. Another analogy that I always think about is the Copernican revolution, the movement from our understanding of the universe as being geocentric, that the Earth was the pivot point, the axis around which the universe spun, the Earth was fixed, and the center of the universe, the central point, and everything sort of radiated out and around from the Earth, moving from that model to the heliocentric model. That's the Copernican revolution, right? Heliocentric model meaning that the sun, that we revolve around the sun, rather than the sun revolving around the Earth, we revolve around the sun. It's similar to that kind of paradigm shift. That's a good word for it, yeah. I'm talking about two different paradigms, I guess is the right word. And I believe at some point I must have read it or heard it in a class, that they had these mechanical models built with the presupposition that the Earth was stationary and that everything revolved around it, and that you could build a model, mechanical model, that functioned, I think, like with gears, and I don't know, maybe you wound it up and it would go, but that somewhat accurately accounted for the movement of the stars. And it's all based, of course, from being here at this point of view on Earth and our observational lens looking out. So it's relative. But given that worldview, that cosmology, the model, there was a model built, I don't know when this would be, 1400s, 1500s, that would more or less account for the movements and things like, what's that called? Procession of the planets? Shoot, I can't think of the word. But how the planets seem to kind of move forwards and backwards and then back again because they're orbiting, because of the pattern of their orbit. But from our perspective, it looks kind of like, almost like horizontal movements. Anyways, it accounts for a lot of those phenomena. You can build a model that does that, but there's always kind of, they could never get it just quite right, because obviously the model was flawed. The fundamental assumption of the model, that we're in a geocentric universe, was off, and so they could never quite get the movements right. No amount of tinkering would have gotten it right. But once you moved that initial assumption to a heliocentric, sun-centered model, all of a sudden a lot of the anomalies in that model, in the geocentric model, just lined up and fell into place, and it became simple and clear and obvious. And I feel like that's sort of what's going on with with science in general, and especially when you think about the inability to really account for a lot of what you could call spiritual experience. It's like they're trying to fit it into this framework, and it's just there's always going to be incongruence, and but the second you switch over to this consciousness based model, spirit-based, God-based model, all of a sudden things just kind of line up and fall into place. There's a simplicity there. It's like the universe comes into order. And yeah, so it has real world consequences, thinking about like psychiatric treatment and drugs that you get put on. I hesitate to say it, but even things as profound as schizophrenia, things like that. I mean, in a sense, it's hopeful in that these sort of incurable and life-upending, life-deranging diseases that we only sort of have symptom management protocols and strategies for, that there may be a deeper, I'll say there is a deeper, but yeah, maybe just to be, I'll just say that there may be a deeper, let's just put it that way, a deeper way to address these things. A deeper science is possible. Doesn't mean this isn't scientific, it just means some of the assumptions are wrong. A deeper physics, a deeper metaphysics. Yeah, it's different understandings of the origin. Again, that word etiology. It's a different understanding of the etiology of disease. I think it accounts for the deficiencies in the current model and our current interventions.